They are now looking to Nouri al-Maliki, the Prime Minister of Iraq, as their puppet to extend their evil influence into that country. Of course, Maliki, who lost the election to Ayad Alawi by 2 seats, then ran to Tehran, and they forced Muqtada al-Sadr with his faction, who hated Maliki, by the way. They forced him to join the coalition with Maliki. They got the Kurds and enough people, enough supporters to give Maliki a narrow majority to form a government and to become again the Prime Minister. And he owes his continuation in that role entirely to the mullahs in Tehran. And as long as that situation continues, every time Maliki goes to Tehran, he is told what he should do about the PMOI. He went there in April and met with the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, who said to him, Prime Minister Maliki, you have made 4 wonderful accomplishments which will never be forgotten. First of all, you expelled the Americans from your territory. Secondly, you are in the process of evicting the MEK from Camp Ashraf. Thirdly, you have cracked down on the Sunni Ba'athist elements in your own government, notably your own vice president, elected vice president Hashemi, who has now fled for his life and is still living in Erbil in safety. And fourthly, your support for Bashar al-Assad. These are the 4 accomplishments in the eyes of Ali Khamenei. An utter disgrace that anyone could say such a thing publicly and announce it proudly. But this, I tell you, to give you an example of the way Nouri al-Maliki works and where his orders come from. So top of the agenda every time he goes to Tehran is, what are you doing about Ashraf? And that was the reason the 2 massacres took place. So we said to the government of Iraq, we will come in with a team from the UN, with UN observers and monitors to make sure this is all done properly and safely, and we'll interview and resettle these people to safe countries, and your question of Ashraf will be solved. And Maliki said, no, you won't. You're not coming to interview any of these people in Ashraf. And we'll take them out of the gates of Ashraf and interview them outside. He said, no, you will move them to another camp altogether. And the Americans then said, we agree with this. We have some old military bases out in the desert where we can send these people. When we looked at these former military bases, these were completely unacceptable. The motive was to harass and intimidate and coerce and bully these people during the process of moving them to Camp Liberty, in order that they would try to get these people to say, we've had enough, just send us back to Iran. And this, of course, was what the mullahs in Tehran were looking for. This would have been the ideal position for them. But now we had the appointment of a special envoy from the UN. Martin Kobler was appointed as the UN Special Representative in Iraq, and his key issue to deal with was to ensure that these 3,200 people in Ashraf were safely moved to Camp Liberty, to this 40,000-acre huge camp, interviewed by UNHCR and then sent to friendly countries. Hillary Clinton appointed Ambassador Dan Fried as special envoy for Ashraf to deal with this problem as well. Even in Europe, we had Cathy Ashton appointing a special envoy who lasted about 6 weeks and then threw in the towel and hasn't been replaced since. So there was a global movement to recognize the importance of this issue and to avoid any further violence and bloodshed. But very quickly I discovered that the move that was being proposed by the government of Iraq from Camp Ashraf to Camp Liberty was nothing more than a hoax. They weren't going to be moved into a 40,000-acre camp at all. In fact, they were being given half a square kilometre with huge wire fences built all around it, with several layers of military guards, with police stations inside, with no mains connection to the Baghdad water supply, with no adequate generators for electricity. The generators that were being given to them were the ones left behind by the Americans, dilapidated, broken down, many of them 12 years old or older, completely unsuitable. The containers in which they were supposed to live were in a dilapidated and equally broken down condition. The surface area of the camp, the half square kilometre, was gravel over which disabled people would not be able to walk. And when we realised this and made objections known to Ambassador Fried and Martin Kobler, the UN Special Representative, we were then told that Martin Kobler was coming with a team from Baghdad to see me in my office in Brussels with some of my colleagues who'd been objecting to these conditions, and he brought a beautiful book of photographs of Camp Liberty. And in each of these photographs, he would show us the interior of these beautiful containers with bunk beds and cupboards in pristine condition, a lovely dining hall with state-of-the-art cooking facilities, trees and plants and grassland areas, and page after page of these beautiful blown-up photographs left me saying, the school I went to was worse than this. And one of my colleagues who did his national service in the Spanish army said the army camps he was in were worse than this. And we got in touch with Mrs. Rajavi in Paris and said, we really can't see that there's a valid reason to object to moving the first 600 people from Ashraf to Liberty. To us, it looks perfectly okay. We have subsequently been told, ladies and gentlemen, by a person who was working for the UN and who left his job and his career after many years as a high official with the UN because of his disgust at what I'm about to tell you, that for 1 week, Martin Kobler, the UN Special Representative, had his whole team in Baghdad working on photoshopping these photographs. And when they took them back day after day to him, he would reject them and say, no, you can still see some rust on this pipe. Get rid of that. You can still see, this area is brown. It should be green grass. They photoshopped and faked these photographs and brought them to the European Parliament to defraud us. And I feel guilty having been persuaded and tricked, hoaxed by this deception. I feel guilty that I then fell for this and told Mrs. Rajavi to overcome her resistance and to move the first 600 people into what has become nothing more than a prison. And then when the first move was agreed to, the humiliation really started. It took more than 24 hours for these people to be almost strip searched. Every item that they took with them was unfolded, emptied out, searched again and again before they were allowed eventually to move to Camp Liberty. They were denied wheelchairs, personal medicines, other personal effects. They're still being told that they cannot build at their own expense canopies to shelter them from the heat. There's blistering sunshine over there at this time of year. They're being told that they cannot take covers or building material to build pathways to enable people in wheelchairs and people who've lost legs and are in crutches to maneuver between the containers they have to sleep in and the dining hall. All of this camp is in a dilapidated condition. The generators break down all the time. The sewage from day one, the pipes were fracturing and the place was flooding with rotten sewage. They have been saying at their own expense from day one, 6 months ago when they first moved there, that they would meet the expense of connecting Camp Liberty to the Baghdad mains water supply. And the government of Iraq have consistently said, we will allow that to happen, but have consistently put obstacles in the way to stop it happening. And 6 months down the line, that's still one of the conditions that we are demanding. One of the Ashrafi people, under incredible stress and fatigue, arriving in Camp Liberty, then died of a heart attack. And now, 150 days later, his body is still being held by the Iraqi authorities. They will not release it to his family, in total breach of not only humanitarian laws, but of even the basic tenets of Islam. And this is absolutely disgraceful. This sort of behavior epitomizes the way the Iraqis are dealing with this. And one of the biggest contempts of all was the appointment as commander of the military in charge of the people in Camp Liberty of none other than Colonel Sadek. He was one of the key commanding officers during the 2 massacres that led to the deaths of 49 people in Camp Ashraf. And with utter contempt, the government of Iraq have appointed him as the commander of Camp Liberty. And he is the one who makes their lives on a daily basis an absolute misery. His most recent cruelty is that when lorries, truckloads filled with foodstuffs arrive at Camp Liberty in 55 degrees heat, he now insists on them being stopped just inside the gates. Remember, by the time they get inside Camp Liberty, they have gone through about 6 checkpoints with sniffer dogs, X-ray machines, police searches, but he stops them just inside the gates and tells the civilian residents of Liberty to unload them by hand. We're talking here tons, maybe 20 tons of food in a truck. He has denied them the right to bring their forklift trucks from Camp Ashraf. That has been a constant source of concern, but they have been denied the right to bring forklifts, and they have to unload everything, all the bags of rice and food, by hand in the heat. And it then sits on the ground for 6 or 7 hours before Sadek sends any inspectors, any guards to search through it and check it for heaven knows what. By that time, the food is wasted, is rotten. Then he will not allow them to reload the trucks and take the trucks to the unloading bays, which are already there in Camp Liberty. He only allows them to take all the foodstuffs in the boots of the 1 or 2 personal cars that they were allowed to take with them from Ashraf to Liberty. These are all ways of coercing, bullying, humiliating these people, making them do physical, hard labor in the blistering heat while watching the foodstuffs that they have paid for ruin in the high temperatures. So, when you consider that the reason we are dealing with this problem is because Martin Kobler signed a memorandum of understanding with the government of Iraq without the agreement of the people of Ashraf, without the agreement of me and my colleagues in the European Parliament. And that memorandum of understanding, which Kobler has repeatedly assured us, means that they will be treated in a completely humanitarian way. That has been defied to the letter by the government of Iraq on a day-by-day basis. I get daily reports, as possibly many of you do, to tell me what's happening in Camp Liberty. And you can see on a day-by-day basis how the basic elements of the Memorandum of Understanding are being denied. So no wonder, with 2,000 people now incarcerated in these prison-like conditions, where they are not allowed to leave, they have no freedom of movement, they can't leave Camp Liberty, they are not allowed to see members of their family who can't go into Camp Liberty, they are not allowed to meet politicians like me, or even lawyers, in absolute fundamental disdain for all the key elements of refugee status. These people are the brave representatives of the main opposition group to the most dangerous regime in the world today. I think they deserve our support, they deserve our help, and it's time the Americans and the UN showed some spine and stood up to Nouri al-Maliki and said to him, your behavior in the past and your behavior right now is completely unacceptable, and you will no longer enjoy our support and our investment from the West unless you start behaving properly, live up to your Memorandum of Understanding that you signed with the UN, show proper, decent, dignified respect for the human rights of these people. Thank you very much.